We're going live at 1 p.m. Eastern. You don't want to miss this one. You don't want to miss this one. A bombshell new report has exposed a United States congressman. He is currently in office for what appears to be dangerous ties to jihadi terror organizations in the Middle East. And no, I'm not talking about Ilhan Omar. Do we have a congressman from the state of Florida who is profiting from his secret connections to jihadi terror groups in the Middle East? This story starts, oddly enough, with a marriage certificate. Congressman Cory Mills, on June 10th, 2014, married a Muslim woman, a woman from Iraq named Rana El-Saidi. This wedding was officiated by a Muslim imam named Mohammed Al-Hanoudi. Now, Mohammed Al-Hanoudi is a name you might recognize, you might not. He's a radical Muslim imam. He is the mufti at a mosque in Falls Church, Virginia, called the Dar al-Haraj Mosque. You may recognize that name because it's better known as the Al-Qaeda Mosque. Now, this radical imam who officiated the wedding between sitting U.S. Congressman Cory Mills and his wife was an unindicted co-conspirator in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, which means he was closely tied to Al-Qaeda. What it really means, when you use the phrase unindicted co-conspirator, it means that he was involved, but he flipped and cooperated with the feds, and so he was let off easy. You'll remember that the 1993 World Trade Center bombing was the precursor to the September 11th, 2001 terror attacks here on the United States homeland. This radical imam who officiated the wedding of Congressman Cory Mills and his wife also raised millions of dollars for the terror group Hamas and belonged to the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, this radical imam died a year or so after he officiated the wedding between Cory Mills and the Muslim woman from Iraq, whom Cory Mills is still married to. And yet the question of how on earth did Cory Mills get married in a ceremony officiated by a radical Muslim imam with connections to terrorism is an outstanding question. Now, following this marriage, Congressman Mills and his Muslim wife established a business together. This business established them as international arms dealers. They specialized in trading arms in the Middle East. This is back in 2014. Cory Mills and his wife founded a company called Paysum Solutions International. Paysum Defense LLC then came afterward. It's a private security company specializing in arms and defense products. Now, after the establishment of this international arms dealing company that Mills founded with his Muslim wife after he was married in a ceremony officiated by a radical Muslim cleric, Cory Mills has traveled frequently and often inexplicably to the Middle East, to Muslim countries. And just shortly after the establishment of his company, a year later, he secured a whopping $228 million arms deal with Iraq. Now, just to give an example of what I mean when I say Cory Mills travels frequently and often inexplicably to Muslim countries in the Middle East, Cory Mills quite recently made a drive in the Middle East that would only have been possible with the approval of top-level Hezbollah operatives. The drive took Cory Mills from Damascus, Syria, that's where he began, and he drove all the way to Beirut, Lebanon. Now, along this 70-mile route, there are multiple Hezbollah checkpoints. And yet, Congressman Cory Mills traveled with no security in a private vehicle. What do you think would happen if you tried the same thing? Or if I did? Do you think we would get through without harm? Do you think we would be afforded passage? No, that's reserved only for people who are in business or associated, have ties, or are acquainted with top-level Hezbollah operatives. Congressman Cory Mills sits on the Foreign Affairs Committee in the United States Congress. He's the chair on the Subcommittee on Oversight and Intelligence. To call his history and his business A conflict of interest with his role in the United States Congress would be the understatement of the year. I would better categorize it as a national security threat. Furthermore, Congressman Cory Mills has lied about his own religious affiliation. Is Cory Mills a convert to Islam? He's told multiple people that, yes, he is. But then, when asked, he also denies it. He's claimed he's a Protestant. At other times, he's claimed he attends Catholic Mass. All of those things can't be true, which means Congressman Cory Mills is not telling the truth. Which again leaves us with a question: is a member of the United States Congress profiting off of his ties to radical Islamist terror groups in the Middle East and then lying about it? With us is the woman who broke this story, host of Blaze News, our very own Jill Savage. Jill, good to see you.
Liz, thank you so much. And you definitely understand the story a lot more than others in the media. So I so appreciate you doing your homework, because this story is insane and has basically been my life since I found the marriage certificate back on March 18th.
Yeah, tell us how this happened, because you were actually on a trip with Congressman Cory Mills, as I understand it. You went to North Carolina with Mercury One. Cory Mills was part of that trip. This is after Hurricane Helene. And my understanding is that Cory Mills either asked you out or made a comment that could be construed as inappropriate to you, and that led you to investigate him?
So there are two separate instances there. So when we were there in October of last year during Hurricane Helene, we were there with Glenn Beck and Mercury One, and it was a great day, right? It was a great day volunteering and helping people out, and just thought, man, what a great guy this is. Now, I first learned of Cory Mills because he rescued one of my friend's husbands out of Israel, right? So he had been involved and around Mercury One, and just trying to help people, right? So I thought, man, this guy couldn't find a better congressman than this one. And so at the very end of that night, back on October 3rd, when we were on the helicopter back to the airport as we were getting ready to come back to Dallas, Congressman Cory Mills, he couldn't just sit in the silence. He had to fill it. He had to just keep talking. And that is what is leading to his undoing. Because at that point in time, he told me, and I believe there were 7 others in the helicopter at the time, that he was completely single. There was absolutely no one in his life, and he was very lonely. I thought, okay, I've heard him say this to other people before, so I thought, all right, he's just a lonely guy. That's a very weird thing to say the first day that you meet someone. But okay, right? You fast forward to December, we had talked for a little while, right? I kept running into him at different events, and he asked me on a date. No big deal. We never went on a date, by the way. So then we go to February 19th. We fast forward in this story. And this is when his DC girlfriend, who he said, again, there was no one in his life. He was lonely. The DC girlfriend calls the cops for an alleged assault at his DC penthouse, which he pays $21,000 a month for. And she said, that he had abused her, and she was in the hotel that was next door. And the cops knew it was her right away without even talking to her, because she was visibly shaking. And they knew that was the woman that must have just called the cops. There were fresh bruises on her arms. In one of the police reports, Liz, she allowed the authorities to listen to Cory on the phone with her, tell her that she needed to change her story. Now, she had since recanted. She decided nothing actually happened. And Congressman Cory Mills is now walking around telling everybody this is a victory. See, nothing happened that day, February 19th. Nothing happened. This was all a misunderstanding, and the police are actually looking into themselves to see how they were handling this event. So that's how this entire thing started, because at that point in time, the February 19th incident, the DC girlfriend told the authorities that Cory Mills was her significant other for over a year. And I went, well, that's a big lie. There was no reason for him to lie to us on that helicopter. Why, when you weren't asked a direct question, why would you just offer up this kind of a lie? Nobody was asking the congressman the very first day we met him what was going on in his personal life. So with that, then I just started to just recall other things that he was saying and the car ride when we were there touring the damage in North Carolina. And he was bragging about how he spent $2.3 million of his own money to get elected. And he was bragging about spending $186,000 of his own money to get people out of Israel. And I said, well, real rich people don't brag about how much they spend. And if you're actually rich, Liz, you're going to get your friends to pay for all that money when you're running for Congress. So that didn't add up. And then he had $400,000 that he pays in rent every year for his DC penthouse. And there's $12,000 for his beach house in Florida. And I just thought, man, Liz, there's something that's not right here. And I saw a comment on X. If you think that's weird, you should go look into his marriage certificate. So I did. That's how we got to the very beginning of the investigation and looking into Cory Mills.
Okay, so talk to me. You find his marriage certificate, which we can bring this up on the screen because your thread, when you reported on this, it went viral. We've seen it. A lot of us have seen it. This is the marriage certificate that not only states the woman that he married, this Muslim woman from Iraq. She's a naturalized U.S. citizen, but she was born in the Middle Eastern country of Iraq. But it names the officiant at his wedding, this radical imam. When you read this, do you realize who this is right away? What's your reaction? What do you do with this?
So I look at the marriage certificate and I see it's an imam, and I'm like, okay, you know what, whatever. But he probably just did this because he loves his wife, right? He probably just did this to marry her. And for whatever reason, right, my brain couldn't let that go. So later that night, I just Googled the name, and I was like, you know what, everything's going to be fine, Liz. Everything is going to be okay. And then I Google Mohammed al-Houthi, and it's that link that you can see there right below where it says major U.S. Muslim Brotherhood figure, passes away. That article was from 2015. But then I thought, oh, crap, we have a real issue here. At that point in time, the investigation really, really kicked off in a big way.
Which, by the way, that article is by Kyle Scheidler from the Center
Yes.
for Security Policy. He is an impeccable journalist when it comes to the
Phenomenal.
connections, especially when you're talking about who's behind the funding of these radical jihadi groups. He is second to none. I've known him for probably decades now. I think very highly of his reporting. Okay, so you figure out that he was married by a radical imam. He's married to a woman. We're talking about Cory Mills now. He's married to a Muslim woman from Iraq. They started this business, this international arms business, which is a shady thing to do in the first place. To specialize in selling arms to countries like Iraq is even shadier. That's not normal. To be in Congress on the Foreign Affairs Committee while you have ownership, I don't care, he says it's in a blind trust. I don't care. You still have an interest in this company. You're still going to eventually profit from this. It's bananas. It's mind-boggling. He is at this moment, to my understanding, in Syria, meeting with the finance minister of Syria, and not as an official envoy of Congress. He's just there.
He's just there. This is his fourth trip over this year, and I use that loosely because I call the New Year's Eve trip. I believe he was still there in the very, very tail end of 2024. It was like December 28th, 29th. He was over in Iraq and Kuwait. He met with the finance minister of Kuwait over there. He met with the prime minister of Iraq. Over Valentine's Day, he goes over to Dubai with his girlfriend. Liz, guess what else is going on in Dubai that week? But the International Arms Expo with 200,000 people there from across the world. That's probably just a coincidence. And then over Easter, he goes over to Syria and eventually Turkey right after that. And when he's in Syria, he is the very first person from the United States, from anybody in the administration, anybody in Congress, to meet with al-Shara, the new Syrian president, who, by the way, about 10 minutes ago, was still a known terrorist with a $10 million bounty on his head because he's former Al-Qaeda, who's right now in New York City meeting with the UN yesterday and having interviews with former general and former director of the CIA, Petraeus. And, that just goes on. And so the fact that he's in Syria right now, of course he is. Of course he is. Because that's what he actually cares about. He's done one town hall in this calendar year. That was on the phone on April 8th. So his team could field the questions ahead of time and figure out, okay, here's what we're going to do. Cory Mills is not interested in actually serving the people in Florida's 7th District. He's interested in benefiting himself and whatever he needs to do over in the Middle East. I'm convinced.
Okay, so here's my question. If this is his history here is he was a member of the military and he served in the Middle East for several years. Then he got out of the military. Then he was a private contractor in the Middle East for several years as well. Where did he acquire the connections to these very high-ranking individuals, whether it's the connections he needed to go on that 70-mile drive from Syria to Lebanon, whether it is a connection to the now president of Syria, the guy you mentioned who 10 minutes ago was a member of Al-Qaeda and is now, we're just whitewashing his history. How did Cory Mills meet these particular, you can call them jihadis. I think that's a pretty accurate description of what they are.
Yeah, so there are three different pillars in the Cory Mills story: the Muslim angle, the stolen valor angle, and all of the women, Liz. So there are a lot of questions about Cory and his military career, and he blurs the lines often between his time in the Army and his time as a private contractor. When he was in the Army, he was a medic and went through and earned a Bronze Star. There are a lot of questions from ourselves here at Blaze and many other media outlets about that Bronze Star in particular. When he moved on to become a contractor, that's when a lot of the problems really began as well. Because when he was in, one city in Iraq, he would have a location there where there were no other Army Rangers there. And I say other because Cory Mills then claimed to be an Army Ranger himself. Now that group
was he?
moved. No, he was not. He was never an Army Ranger. So this is the thing. To get in to be a contractor at that point in time, I'm told you had to be a dude, right? You had to be a tier 1 specialist to get in. So on his paperwork, what do you think it said? It says he's an Army Ranger. It says he's a sniper. What we know is he's an Army medic, and they do not give out those sniper spots often to people who are not going to be going along that track, right? They only have so many spots. They only have so many people that they can fill in those spots. So he claims throughout his time in Iraq when he worked with Dying Corps that he was an Army Ranger. He was a sniper. He was this, he was that. He was not any of it. And Liz, how do we know this then? Because the guys that worked with him would say that they're very easy terminology, that if you're a Ranger, you know the terminology. You know how they talk. And he had no recollection of that. And then when they moved cities, and they actually had 5 Army Rangers that joined the group in, I believe it was the second city that they were in with that group in Iraq. And all the other Army Rangers were like, hey, Cory, who was your leader for this? Who taught you that? Who was this? And he had no answers for them. And they could tell that he was only playing the part, that he wasn't actually it. So the story goes that one of the Army Rangers there at the time told him that, Cory, if I ever hear the words that you're an Army Ranger come out of your mouth ever again, I'm going to knock your teeth in. They were not messing around there. And then it came to the crescendo where all of the paperwork had to be resubmitted. If you were a contractor over there, things were going down in the Middle East, and the State Department needed to figure out these guys are who they say they are, right? This was industry-wide. And Cory Mills knew he couldn't turn in his paperwork. So Jesse Parks was his shift leader, and he kept saying, Cory, you have until Friday. You have until, they gave him a month or 2 months or whatever. Turn in your paperwork. Cory did not turn in his paperwork at the deadline, the night before the paperwork was due. Cory left his gun and all of his stuff on his bunk and walked out of the consulate in Erbil, Iraq in the middle of the night. Cory denies that, says, oh, I would never do that. Who would do such a thing? My contract was going to be up in 2 weeks, and I didn't go around and tell everyone goodbye. I'm sorry. Well, I had a girlfriend that was over there that I wanted to go fly home with her, so sorry that I didn't tell everyone goodbye. But we've talked to multiple people there, again, including the man who would have been firing him that next morning.
That is wild. So it seems like he exaggerated his military service in order to get a job as a private contractor. He was caught in his lie. He also claimed, by the way, multiple times that he was blown up. I think he said he was blown up twice. That also turned out to be false, if I'm not mistaken here. So, okay, so we're starting to see the pattern here. He seems like a pathological liar. It seemed like he wanted money. I mean, you get paid quite nicely to be a private contractor, definitely more than you get paid to be a U.S. military service member. Is this when he was a private contractor, is that where he made these connections to what would then be the people that he would conduct business with as an arms dealer? Or is that a connection that or those connections he made through his Muslim wife when he got back to the States?
So this is what it looks like. When he left the time as a private contractor with DynCorp, he worked a couple different jobs, and some of them are pretty notable, especially as we defunded USAID. He worked for a company called Kamala from, I believe, the end of 2010 through 2011. And you'll know Kamala potentially. Mike Benz talks about this in a lot of his videos out there. Because they were the largest recipient of USAID money at one point in time, over $17 billion since 2008. There's one point. He worked for Pax Mondal, a British NGO that is now defunct because they had terrible contracts with governments and were defrauding them. So I believe that is where he met his wife. Both of them worked there for a brief period of time.
At the British NGO.
At the British NGO,
okay.
At Pax Mondal. That is where they both worked for a brief period of time. So that's where we believe that he met her. Now, beyond that, we don't know. What we do know then is we jump ahead to 2014. They are married, and of course, they just start the old American dream, Liz. It's the International Arms Company. Now, Rana al-Saadi is a naturalized U.S. citizen. Her family came over here. She came over from a 10-bedroom house in Iraq with 24 family members. And within 6 years, starts the Paysum Solutions International and then Paysum Defense. So you're telling me that a poor refugee can come over to the United States and just have a dream. And that dream is going to be to start an international arms company once she meets her American husband, right? So there are a lot of things that I'm like, we don't have every answer, but we have a lot of puzzle pieces that are floating around that we can start to piece together.
Yeah, I mean, even an incomplete puzzle at this point is extremely problematic. Do you know what kind of marriage this was? Was it love? Was it a business arrangement?
I believe that it is for love. I mean, Cory Mills is known to cheat on both of his wives. His first ex-wife left him because he cheated on her so many times. But at that time, the mother-in-law is the one who really wanted an Iraqi to marry these two. And, you know, I found that, okay, you know what, again, you're going to do what your mother-in-law tells you to do. That happens in a lot of marriages, you know, not just in the United States, but around the world and throughout the history of time. But I think it's interesting that if you wanted an Iraqi to marry you, you go to the very top of the list. You don't just start. If this had been a random imam, Liz, I wouldn't have looked any further. But the fact is, you started with a mufti who, this is 11 months before he dies of basically old age. So why are they wheeling out the big dog in town to marry Cory Mills, who at that point was still a nobody? He wasn't running for Congress yet. Nobody really knew who he was. He was a former military guy, former contractor. So how do you get that to happen, right? And I love this twist and turn in this story. One, I have talked to somebody who has been at his wedding reception. Cory Mills was dressed in the full Arabic garb. They were singing all of the Arabic songs. They had a circle around them of all of the men. They believed it was like the brothers and influential men in her life. And Cory and Rana were there in the center of the circle. This group, these people could only last about 15 minutes. They were like, we came. We're out of here. This is whatever this is. We're not going to be a part of it. But Cory Mills says, oh, no. I didn't convert to Islam. No. Actually, I'm not allowed to go into that mosque. No. That mufti actually married us at a Starbucks.
What?
That's what do you think we're dumb? Do you think that again, the mufti, do you think the mufti is bending Islamic law for you, Cory Mills? Now, we have since talked to 6 people in Cory's life that he personally told them of his conversion to Islam. And we know, again, the Islamic rules are an Islamic woman must marry an Islamic man because the man is the head of the household. He leads the family, and everything that they do leads to more and furthering Islam. Now, an Islamic man can marry a non-Muslim woman. That's fine, because she would then be going along with him. He is the head of the household. So Cory Mills wants us to suspend everything that we know about the religion of peace and how tolerant they are, and just say, no, 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 no. I was married at a Starbucks, you guys. Just believe me.
Wait a second. I'm very curious about this mother-in-law, the mother of this Muslim woman from Iraq that Cory Mills married. Jill, I do not have on my casual contact list on my cell phone the mufti at the Al-Qaeda mosque. That's not someone that's on my quick dial list. That's not normal to be associated with someone like that. Who is this mother-in-law? What do we know about her?
Yeah, so it's interesting because if you actually look at the marriage certificate, what we've learned, and since talking with Cory himself, is that the mother and the father's name on the marriage certificate were inverted. And I found that interesting. I was like, wait, what? Why would that be? Rana's father was allegedly killed back in Iraq along with her oldest brother. They told the Floridian in a 2022 article that the brother and father of Rana al-Sadi were killed for trying to get Islam out of schools over there. So
is that true?
Take that for what, that's what they tell. That's what they tell people. I don't know that that's true or not, but I find that highly suspicious. That why are you, how on earth are you trying to get Islam out of schools in the middle of Iraq? Like that, he's asking us to suspend what we know about common sense when that happens. But I do know that when they moved over here, the 24 family members, the mother was a part of that group that came over here. They did spend 6 months in Syria and 6 months in Jordan. In the meantime, between their exit from Iraq and them coming to the United States. And I do know because, I've done a lot of research. We've looked up a lot of stuff. Liz, when we were out there in DC back in April, Matt Peterson and I, we took a little road trip. We wanted to see the Al-Qaeda mosque. We wanted to just go drive by, and just see what was going on. And then I have, I've looked up a lot of the family members and tried to see who's where, connect the dots. The mom lives about 5 minutes away from the Al-Qaeda mosque. We drove.
Oh, that's so.
So, but it's probably nothing. It's probably nothing. What do we even ask any questions for?
Well, I think this is a fair question to ask when the person that officiated your wedding is a radical imam, the mufti at the Al-Qaeda mosque. I think this is a fair question to ask. Cory Mills has told 6 different people that he converted to Islam, and then he has proceeded to lie to the public about his religious affiliation. Jill, is he a radical Muslim, do you think?
Not that I would believe. I believe that he converted. I believe that in my heart. That is my personal opinion, and that of 6 other people that he told. But I believe that he conflates Christianity and Islam as they're very similar, Liz. The people of the Islamic faith actually have Jesus that's in there, and it's all kind of the same thing. That is very hard to believe. If you're a Christian, you would not believe that whatsoever. But I don't believe that Cory Mills himself would be radicalized. Now, is he going to be showing up next to people that were former terrorists and that are now running the country of Syria? Sure. Is he going to take all these crazy road trips through? Where, by the way, that trip when he was in Syria, they were in armored vehicles provided by the Syrian government, the entire trip around Damascus. So for him to just get into a private car on his own from Damascus to Beirut, the Beirut wasn't even his final stop, Liz. He was on his way to Turkey. Another congressman had flown directly from Damascus to Turkey. Cory Mills just wanted to take the long route, the Sunday drive to get there, which just, again, leads to more questions. Cory has then told us since then that no, you guys have it all wrong. It was actually safer for me to drive that entire distance. No. Hezbollah doesn't control the border on both sides anymore. You guys have that wrong. Okay, so you're telling us that our very current intel sources are completely wrong about one of the most watched borders in the entire world? You're telling us that we don't have that right? I find that hard to believe, as many things in this story.
Yeah, this entire narrative is extremely troubling. This would be troubling, honestly, if Cory Mills were a private citizen, but the fact that he's a sitting United States congressman and that he serves on the Foreign Affairs Committee, I should say, is
And House Armed
extremely
Services. Yes.
House Armed Services. I mean, this is beyond troubling. It's actually, I wonder if Speaker Johnson is aware of this, because this has national security implications, regardless of his ideology. And I do think it's worthy of investigation what Cory Mills' actual ideology is. If you're palling around with radical Muslims who are associated with Al-Qaeda, that is certainly a valid and urgent question to be answered. But even if his motivation is purely financial, even if he is just willing to, in my opinion, compromise all human decency and morals to profit from doing arms business with regimes that are run by former Al-Qaeda members, I mean, this poses a significant national security threat because he could easily be compromised. His decisions on that committee could be informed by his own profit motive. It's wild that Speaker Johnson hasn't, at the very least, removed him from the committees on which he serves.
Yes, and ourselves and other journalists, Brianna Morello has been helping us out. We've reached out to the speaker and asked him for comment several times on this story now. I do believe that he's getting more up to speed as more of this comes to light, and it helped that the Twitter thread went viral there. But there is so much meat on this bone, and we should say that Ilhan Omar actually changed everything for Cory Mills. It was the vote of that Nancy Mace had brought forward, just trying to strip Ilhan Omar of her committees that she was on. And Cory Mills was one of 4 Republicans that sided with the Democrats. And at that point, Liz, I should say, we had gotten a lot of blowback because Cory Mills is a hero. What are you doing? Why are you going? This man is a good man. Don't do this to him. Then that vote happened. And everybody
showed his
said,
true characters.
Wait a minute. Why would this guy be voting to help Ilhan Omar? What is going on here? And I was like, oh, over here. I might have some answers. I might help in this.
Listen,
regard.
this is why I have been screaming from the rooftops for years, saying that members of Congress should be forced to vote on every single issue, because what they do now is they just avoid, they duck and they dodge, and they try not to ever go on record on difficult issues so that they are not held accountable, so that their true colors are never seen by the voters. But when they actually do go on record, people are horrified. Jill, this is an incredible story, and I have a feeling this is just the beginning. So I encourage everybody with us today to do 2 things. First of all, raise your voice and demand from Speaker Johnson that Cory Mills be removed from these committees. He is a national security risk. He is what appears to be vulnerable very easily for compromise. He has financial conflicts of interest. He's doing business alongside, quote unquote, former Al-Qaeda members in the Middle East, trafficking arms. Raise your voice. You know that your voice makes a difference. You see this almost on a daily basis when we raise our voices on this show. So demand from Speaker Johnson, tag him on X, tag him on Instagram, call his office, email him, let him know how important this is to you. And I promise you it will make a difference. And also the second thing is follow Jill on X. Jill, what is your handle? People are going to want to be in tune with you for what's to come next here in this story.
It's Jill_Savage on X. And I should say the sextortion case, we didn't get to all the women, but his restraining order hearing will continue on Friday to see if he can if the Miss United States, the reigning Miss United States, can actually get a restraining order against Cory Mills for sextortion.
What an absolute creep. What a creep. Oh, all right, Jill, can you reveal what we should look for? More reporting here to come? I know you're working on some angles here.
Yeah, I mean, there is going to be so much more. I think the next thing would be in regards to the Bronze Star. I told you people have a lot of questions about that, and Cory Mills has produced paperwork that he wanted people to just say, oh, see, here it is. Now stop asking questions. We kept asking more questions.
All right. Well, Jill_Savage on X. I can assure you all there is much more to this story yet to come. Jill, fantastic reporting. Thank you for joining us on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Liz.
All right. Kamala Harris went on Rachel Maddow's show and got in some trouble. This is actually the funniest clip that you will ever see of Kamala Harris, and I know that's making a pretty big claim. She says in her new book that her first choice for vice presidential running mate was Pete Buttigieg, but that she decided not to pick him ultimately because he's gay. And Rachel Maddow grilled her about this. Wait till you hear Kamala Harris's answer on this. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by All Family Pharmacy. Are you tired of doctors telling you no? You can't get prescriptions for affordable off-patent medications, or insurance won't cover what actually works for you and your family. Well, if I've just described you, you're not alone. Millions of others are also frustrated with our healthcare system, not because it's broken, but because it's corrupt. All Family Pharmacy is your alternative. They're a patient-first, independent pharmacy. They connect you with licensed U.S. doctors who approve your prescriptions online fast and legally, so there's no gatekeeping, there's no insurance middlemen, no red tape. They offer affordable, high-demand medications that are often hard to access. I'm talking ivermectin, for example. It starts at just $2 at All Family Pharmacy. Medbendazole, hydroxychloroquine, antibiotics, NAD, you name it, they have it. Over 200 different medication options. You order online, it takes just minutes. Then a licensed doctor reviews and approves your prescription. Medications are then shipped straight to your door. So no clinic visits, no hassle. Everything is secure, HIPAA compliant, and pharmacist reviewed. You choose the medication, not an insurance company or an indoctrinated physician. Real healthcare freedom means you decide what's right for your body. That's where All Family Pharmacy comes in. It's time to put your medical freedom back in your hands. Visit them, allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. And because you are part of this movement, use my code Liz10 at checkout for an exclusive discount. Even if you don't need medication at this moment, check them out anyway, so you have them as a resource when that moment comes. It's your health. It should be your choice. That's allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz, code Liz10. All right, Kamala Harris is out with a new book about her run for president. And right at the very beginning of the book, she reveals that her first choice for vice presidential running mate, boy, is this a slap in the face to Tim Walz. Her first choice for vice presidential running mate was not Tim Walz. It was actually Pete Buttigieg. But Kamala Harris says she ultimately decided not to choose Pete Buttigieg to run with her on her ticket because Pete Buttigieg is gay. When she made this claim in her book, Rachel Maddow, who, by the way, is openly gay, invited Kamala Harris on her show and confronted her about this claim. And this is what Kamala Harris answered. Take a look.
I guess I'd ask you to just elaborate on that a little bit. It's hard to hear.
Yeah.
With you running as, you're the first woman elected vice president. You're a black woman and a South Asian woman elected to that high office, very nearly elected president. To say that he couldn't be on the ticket effectively because he was gay is hard to hear.
No. That's not what I said. That he couldn't be on the ticket because he is gay. My point, as I write in the book, is that I was clear that in 107 days, in one of the most hotly contested elections for president of the United States, against someone like Donald Trump who knows no floor, to be a black woman running for president of the United States and as a vice presidential running mate, a gay man, with the stakes being so high, it made me very sad, but I also realized it would be a real risk. No matter how, I've been an advocate and an ally of the LGBT community my entire life. So it wasn't about, yeah, right. So it wasn't about any prejudice on my part, but
that
we had such a short period of time, and the stakes were so high. I think Pete is a phenomenal public servant. And I think America is and would be ready for that. But when I had to make that decision with 2 weeks to go, and maybe I was being too cautious, I'll let our friends, we should all talk about that. Maybe I was. But that's the decision I made, and I, as with everything else in the book, I'm being very candid about that.
Yeah.
With a great deal of sadness about also the fact that it might have been a risk.
Okay, first of all, imagine if this were a Republican saying what Kamala Harris just said. Imagine if a Republican went on cable news after having lost the presidential election, and no, it wasn't a hotly contested presidential election. Kamala Harris lost in a landslide to Donald Trump. Imagine if a Republican said, actually, my first choice for vice presidential running mate, I decided against because he was gay. The left's head would explode. They would be screeching and screaming and melting down like the Wicked Witch of the West, calling that Republican a bigot, a hateful, homophobic bigot. And what does Rachel Maddow do? Rachel Maddow, trips over herself saying, oh, an advocate and an ally for LGBTQ cause. That's what Kamala Harris claimed. And Rachel Maddow goes, oh, to say the least. Just imagine if Kamala Harris were a Republican saying the same thing. Listen, here's the thing. Kamala Harris, her answer, she said she didn't disqualify Pete Buttigieg because he's gay, because she's personally prejudiced. She disqualified him. She decided not to choose him because he's gay, because you're prejudiced. She is dripping with disdain for you. That's what she means when she says, I only had 107 days. She didn't have time to contend with the homophobic masses. She didn't have time to re-educate the Christians, the terrible, hateful Christians who hate Pete Buttigieg because he's gay. She's dripping with disdain for you, but she's above board. She's the one who denied a position to a gay man because of his sexual orientation, but she's not prejudiced. The problem is you. Good Lord. How lucky are we that she is not the president of the United States? And by the way, Kamala Harris didn't want to go with a gay guy for vice presidential running mate, so instead she chose this guy. Picture Dancing Queen playing in your head, because that's the background of this video. Spence, do we have this? Oh, that's right. Oh, YouTube. Good old YouTube will ding us if we... So the funny part of this video, not to have to explain a joke here, is this montage of Tim Walz being the masculine man that he is, of course, juxtaposed against the song Dancing Queen. She chose this Dancing Queen instead of Pete Buttigieg because he's the straightest straight man you can ever imagine. He'll appeal to those rednecks. Uber masculine. That's Tim Walz for you. Of course it is. All right. I have to tell you guys, of course, we are going to address what I teased at the top of yesterday's show. I said yesterday, President Trump had a major Oval Office announcement that was upcoming. He made the announcement after we went off air yesterday. So I said, listen, he's going to talk about autism, and we're going to cover that on the show tomorrow, which means that we are going to cover it today. I do have to tell you, if you want my honest take on this, my completely unfiltered analysis of this announcement from President Trump, and I know that you do, or I suspect that you do, because I've gotten a lot of text messages about this from people in the industry and from people in my life since this announcement in the Oval Office. I regret to inform you that we cannot allow this segment to air on YouTube because YouTube is an apparatus of censorship when it comes to these types of topics. So I'm going to give everyone who is watching with us on YouTube at this moment, I'm going to give you a minute to switch over with us. We are also live on X, so you can go to x.com/Liz_Wheeler, because I do think you're going to want to hear my analysis of President Trump's autism announcement. You can also go to Spotify if you're watching this not as a live stream. You can go to Spotify, search The Liz Wheeler Show. We're going to have it up on Spotify and on Apple as well. I believe the only place that at this point that we have to censor is YouTube and possibly Facebook. So if you're watching on Facebook, you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and switch over, because some things need to be said about what happened in the Oval Office yesterday. Some people are saying, is this good? Is this bad? Was it underwhelming? Is this it? Is it just the beginning? What do you make of what President Trump said about autism? And I'm going to tell you, just unfortunately, not on YouTube. So those of you on YouTube, I assume that you have switched over to x.com/Liz_Wheeler by now. If not, go ahead.